Alright, so now we're going to do the same thing that we did on Minmus, but on Kerbin. Big thing here is if you want to do a power descent on Kerbin, you got to have enough thrust. You can see the thrust to weight ratio of this rocket, or of the upper stage of this rocket, is probably not big enough. It's 1.17. So if it was 1, I couldn't decelerate. I could only cancel gravity. I couldn't fight against gravity, at least at the surface. To decelerate at any reasonable velocity, I'm going to want this to be at least, say, 1.5 or so. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to modify this rocket a little bit, and I'm going to replace it with a slightly smaller fuel tank. Now, I could get rid of the ASAS, but I kind of want the ASAS because it does make controlling the rocket a little better, easier, especially when I'm talking, doing a tutorial at the same time. So, come on. Alright, there we go. So now I've got a thrust to weight ratio of 1.57. That's a lot better. So, we're going to use this as a test bed to show you how you land on a planet with air, with a big gravity field, as opposed to Minmus or the moon, which I showed you in the previous segment. So I'm going to use this thing to create a ballistic trajectory, and I'm going to point it over that away a little bit. Nope. Come on. There we go. I want to make sure I come down over land. That's all I'm doing there. Alright. Toss that away. So you can see I'm up at around 10K. I'm going to start falling. So you can pretend I was coming in from orbit. I'm not going to be coming in nearly as fast as I would be from orbit. But what I'm going to show you is one of the tricks when you're landing on a big gravity field like on Kerbins is don't use your engine to decelerate you. Use the atmosphere. It's called aero braking, and you can do it in the game. So if I were coming in from orbital velocity, I would have a velocity of a couple of thousand meters per second right now. But I would be bleeding it off rapidly in the atmosphere, even at this level. And once I get down to 10K, I rapidly decelerate. So you're going to see my space pod here is going to accelerate up to maybe 250 meters per second, and then it's going to decelerate back down to 130. And even if I was coming in from orbit, once I get to about 2K in the atmosphere, oops, I'm going to decelerate down to about 130 meters per second. That's just the way the atmosphere works. It also kills some of your significant amount of your sideways velocity. So even though I gave myself a decent amount of sideways velocity with that first stage there, you can see it's almost all gone at this point. The drag from the atmosphere is just doing that. So the point is, you don't want to use your engine. You don't want to waste all your delta V slowing you down when the atmosphere is going to slow you down anyway. So once you get couple thousand meters, depending on how much thrust to weight ratio your stage has, depends on when you need to start your burn, you're going to want to start decelerating because the atmosphere is just not going to decelerate you anymore. So I'm going to start my burn right around here. And the big thing here is, now you can see my burn's at full throttle. In Minmus it wasn't even close because I need to slow myself down. So, and now I'm going to hold that descent rate. You can see I have 400 meters to go. I've got 3/4 of my tank left, and I've got a little bit of sideways velocity, which I'm going to kill by using that nav ball technique I showed you earlier. So I'm going to line the nav ball over the dot, and there you go. Now I'm perfectly vertical, and just coming in. And the big thing is, make sure you don't waste fuel. Make sure this gets down to about 0, and this gets down to about 0. There you go. I'm almost hovering at this point. I got half a tank of fuel left. I'm going to throttle back just a little. Let that number come up. Let that number go down. And a little bit of a rough landing, but there you go. So that's how you do it. You can see I had to do a lot faster here and burn through a lot more fuel really quickly. You got to be quick on a planet like this. You don't have time to screw around like you did on Minmus, which is why I started there, so I could walk through everything I did. but I think you can see I basically did the same steps here. Try to keep the descent vector centered on that nav ball dot, and that means you're coming down vertically. It means you've killed your horizontal motion. You're going to want to use enough SAS to be able to help control you while doing that. If you don't, personally, I find that if you're trying to land without any SAS, you're going to have trouble because you've got to kill the rotation manually, which means you've got to constantly be on your keys or your joystick. Very hard piloting technique, at least in a heavy gravity field like this. Probably doable on the moon or moon miss. Okay, so hopefully that was a lesson in how to land, as opposed to how to get there. You can see, keep your velocity vector centered here, fly by instruments basically, and if you want, load up a mod like MechJeb that gives you the altitudes. You can see that's pretty invaluable. The game claimed I had 140 meters to go, but in fact the land is 140 meters high, and without a true altitude, can be tough, especially on a place like this where it's not very forgiving. You can use your shadow. I showed you that, but it's a little harder in a gravity field here. Alright, so hope that helped, and we'll see you on the next tutorial.